My name is Dr. George Giuliani, and this is the lecture for class SPED 242 from Hofstra University, Psychoeducational Assessment, on writing a comprehensive report in special education. And the goal of today's class, over the course of this entire lecture, will be for you to walk away with an understanding of what actually constitutes a comprehensive report when you're doing an educational evaluation in special education. In a sense, this is the capstone to everything that we've done in this course, and the idea now is to pull it all together so that you could actually write an educational report from start to finish. Now, there are many different professionals that can provide input into the assessment of a child with a suspected disability. Again, we've talked about this with the multidisciplinary team. And when we put all of this together, each of the members of the team have to create a comprehensive report based on the findings, and that has to be a written report. You, as future educational evaluators, are going to have to put together the report with all the information that you have collected along the way. And the purpose of this report is to communicate the results in such a way that the reader will be able to understand the rationale behind the recommendations, and then will be able to use those recommendations as practical guidelines for intervention. Because again, a report is only as effective as the information that's able to be expressed. So the report itself is going to be presented to the parent. It could be sent to an outside doctor or agency, and it's definitely going to be presented to the eligibility committee when the whole evaluation is actually completed. But in any case, the report needs to be professional, it needs to be comprehensive, and it has to be practical. And writing a good report is a real skill. And the fact is that all the data that you collect could be absolutely wonderful, but it's absolutely useless if you can't interpret it or explain it in a clear and concise manner. So if you do all the work and do all the testing and do everything really well, but ultimately you write a lousy report, if it's not clear and concise, it's not going to serve any purpose. So report writing is a real skill that you absolutely have to know. So for example, if you're too general in your report, or you're explaining the results poorly, that's going to create all kinds of problems for the readers. Also, if you're giving kind of just general recommendations, as we'll talk about later, that have no practical value, or have nothing that the school can really use, or the teacher can use, or the parents can use, then the report is almost meaningless. So writing a report that contains meaningless information, or writing a report that contains a lot of big words and jargon that nobody understands is essentially useless. So when you create a report, it has to be something that has real practical value. So if you write a really lengthy report in order for it to be comprehensive, but it has no meaning, you'll just lose the reader. The idea is to have it in a certain number of pages, make it a strong report, and ultimately something that can be understood by everyone who reads it. Now, when you write a report, the key again is to be as comprehensive as possible, but being clear and concise. And to do this effectively, it's important to understand some really practical guidelines. And so what we're going to talk about now are some practical guidelines to follow when you write an educational report. Okay, the first thing you have to remember is you're always writing the report in the third person. So you're going to use phrases like according to the examiner. The examiner is you, but you don't use the word you, okay? You don't talk about I believe, I think. We don't do that. We write in the third person. It was felt that. There seems to be. It's the professional opinion of this evaluator that. The professional approach is always to remain in the third person. You don't use I. You don't say I think, you don't say I believe. It is this examiner, according to this examiner, it was felt that, etc. But you write a report in the third person. So when you write your reports for the course, don't use I for anything. Second, reports are single-spaced. The entire report is single-spaced, and you'll find that the report is going to be around 4 or 5 pages, and that tends to not be too overwhelming when you use that as the length. There will be several ideas that I'll suggest throughout this lecture and in the chapter in your textbook that can break the report up so that the format is very easy on the reader itself. And again, you have a model report that you can look at, and you'll see that the reports are single-spaced in length. Now, you write a report in the past tense as often as possible. The majority of the report is in the past tense. And the reason for this is that because the data was already collected and you've done the assessment, you use the past tense. So for example, on the reading subtest, Billy scored in the 95th percentile. Not Billy's score is in the 95th percentile. Billy scored in the 95th percentile. During testing, Sally exhibited shyness. Exhibited shyness. Throughout the interview, Tommy showed no signs of hyperactivity. Sally appeared to lack confidence when doing tasks that required hand-eye coordination. So as you can see, use the past tense in your report as often as possible. Also, you always separate sections. We're going to be spending a good deal of time in this lecture talking about the sections. And the way you separate sections is by skipping a line or two. Normally it's 2 lines. And this is done for the purposes of clarity, so that when somebody reads a report, you know one section from the next section, because since everything is single-spaced, that skipping of 2 lines breaks up the report, so you know you're in the next section. Also, underline, bold, or italicize paragraph headings so that they stand out and are easy to locate. Again, you want to be consistent here. So if you bold one section, make sure you bold all sections. If you italicize paragraph headings, make sure you italicize all paragraph headings. There's no set way of doing this. Different people do it different ways, but ultimately you want it to be neat, you want it to look professional, and of course you want it to be consistent so that every section looks the same in terms of its format. And anytime you create a new section in your report, underline it so that the reader knows that this starts a new area, a different section within the report. So always underline the new sections within the report. Or at a minimum, if you don't do that, at least be consistent so the reader would pick up a report and know that, hey, this is a new section. But I would recommend you underline or bold it. Again, it's not like APA style where it must be a certain way. It's just got to look professional. And you can see the model reports in order to take a look at this. Finally, always write a report using complete sentences. I cannot stress this enough. We don't use, short phrases. Forget the idea of something like what you write with texting, and you shorten things so that you just write words the way they are supposed to be written. You write in complete sentences. A report should never look like a telegram or a text message. Make sure that all the sentences make sense. Always check for spelling and grammatical errors to make sure your grammar to make sure there are no errors involved. There's really nothing that looks more unprofessional in a report, that looks sloppy and has many mistakes. And one of the things that I always recommend is have someone else read the report. Have someone who doesn't know anything about special education read the report, who can look and say, oh, this doesn't make sense to me, or you missed a period here, etc. So again, when you're writing the report, make sure you use complete sentences, make sure you check for spelling, make sure you check for grammar, because in the end, the report needs to look professional. And at this time, we'll stop this video and we'll go to part 2 of this lecture.